Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming in such large numbers. So I'm going to be talking to you tonight about the elemental kingdoms. Now, I've given this information out as both study groups and talks several times over the last few years, and every time I have moments of feeling uneasy about doing so. And the reason for my unease is that, as you'll see, the powers of the elementals can be great and destructive. They can also be extremely helpful and constructive. If this were not so, I definitely would not be speaking about them. Now, having said that, the information is out there. Everything that I'm going to tell you tonight is in print. It came from P Blavatsky. So, I'm not telling anyone anything they couldn't find out if they wanted to. But I hope I'll stress to you the need to use these energies positively. So I hope that by the end of this talk, you'll see it only makes sense to work with the elemental forces for good purposes. Any abuse of them will bring karmic consequences to the user and to others. And according to the theosophical teaching, as given out by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, who liked to be known as HPB, so I will refer to her as that, these consequences can be extremely unpleasant for all. And for that reason, I appeal to you only to consider how the elementals can be used to increase the amount of goodness available to the world and thus ultimately uplift the whole of humanity. So I'm sorry to have to begin with a health warning, but the more I speak about the elementals, the more I feel that this warning should be given. And we just concentrate on the positive side. So I hope I'll make this clear. Now, first question, is it possible to define the elementals? So I've tried to find a simple definition for the elementals, but this isn't easy. Now, throughout the talk, I'll be giving a lot of information, as much as I can, about them. But HPB openly admits that she has not given us all the information we would need to understand the elementals completely, because, as she says, mankind is not yet ready for this information. In order to try to give some basic definition, I'm going to start with a quotation from Deity, Cosmos and Man by Geoffrey Farthing, who was a member of the Theosophical Society, a very important member in England. And he also served as president for a time, and he was a great speaker. Not that I ever knew him, sadly. He passed on before my time. And his book is available as a free download if anyone wants it. It's very good. So, in his chapter entitled Elements and the Elementals, he gives this simple definition. Elementals are centers of living energy. The souls or spirits of the elements. The term is applied particularly to these entities, for such they are, as they occur in the three kingdoms that precede the mineral in our physical world. So in a moment, I'm going to illustrate to you what he means by the three kingdoms. So I'll come back with more information about the elementals themselves later, but for now, I'd like to indicate the place of the elemental kingdoms in the creation. So what follows is a description of the process of the unfolding of creation, or the descent of spirit into matter. According to the theosophical teaching, the creation radiates from where there was previously no manifest creation. It's important to understand that all we perceive through the senses is an appearance only, because the underlying reality is always unity, commonly referred to as para Brahm in this teaching. I would suggest that the easiest way to do this is to see the creation as a reflection of that underlying unity. So if you look in a mirror, you see yourself. If you turn the mirror away or walk away from the mirror, you don't see yourself anymore. You're still there, but the reflection is gone. So whatever is said here, it's all apparent. So the creation appears to emanate from Parabrahm, the all-pervading, incognizable principle of the universe, and appears to descend to its most material before appearing to return to the source. So remember, in essence, it never actually leaves the source. So each divine spark or monad that emanates makes its pilgrimage through all the kingdoms of nature. So what part do the elementals play in this scheme? Let's look where to place the elemental kingdoms in this great emanation. And this is, I have to stress, this is my diagram. It's not an official diagram, and it's just to try to help to see this a little bit more clearly. So everything begins in the divine, of course. So the divine isn't part of this, but there are 7 kingdoms that emanate. So there's the first kingdom of elementals, the second kingdom of elementals, and the third. And then down at the bottom there is the mineral kingdom. And the next is the vegetable or plant kingdom, the next the animal, and the next human. So the first group comprises 3 degrees of elementals, or nascent centers of forces. So nascent means just coming into existence. So the first 3 group comprises the 3 degrees of elementals, or nascent centers of forces, from the first stage of the differentiation of Mula Prakriti to its 3rd degree, that is, from full unconsciousness to semi-perception. Now I'm going to say something about this word Mula Prakriti. Now, according to the Theosophical Glossary, which you can buy, Mula Prakriti means the para-Brahmic root, the abstract deific feminine principle, undifferentiated substance, and another name for it is Akasha. Literally, it is the root of nature, Prakriti, or matter. So what we're saying is that these first 3 groups, which are just coming into existence, they're coming from the first stage of the differentiation of this Mula Prakriti to its 3rd degree. So I hope that's clear. So this is all about the unfolding of creation, or the descent of spirit into matter. This is how we all get here. So then if you look on the right-hand side of the diagram, there are the 3, the second or higher group, which is the vegetable, the animal, and the human. Now, the mineral kingdom thus forms the central or turning point in the degrees of the monadic essence. Okay, so I just hope that diagram helps you, but if it's inaccurate in any way, it's entirely my fault. So, having seen where the elemental kingdoms fit into the descent of spirit into matter, let us now take a closer look at the nature of the elementals. Now, in the days when HPB used to meet with her closest students, who were highly educated, intelligent, and accomplished people, she tried to explain the nature of the elementals to them. You can read these transcripts from the study groups in either of their 2 editions, each containing the same material. They're called the Secret Doctrine Commentaries and the Secret Doctrine Dialogues, the latter of which is made available by the ULT as a free download as well as a book. So she has these highly intelligent people around her, and you'll see later on how she speaks to them all as if they're a bit stupid, and she calls them names sometimes. one of them's amusing. I'd never heard it before, but she'll call them flapdoodles because of their lack of understanding. So if they didn't understand then, and they had her there to help, then you can see why this is difficult. So the seven kingdoms, the first group, which are the first differentiation of Mula Prakriti to its third degree, and then the second or higher group, kingdoms from vegetable to man, and the mineral kingdom forming the central or turning point in the degrees of the monadic essence. So there's the diagram again. So this is the conversation with her students. Madame Blavatsky says, elementals are simply the creatures produced for the various species of differentiation. That is to say, every differentiation of matter produces and evolves a kind of force of an intelligence, that which the Kabbalists and the Rosicrucians call elemental spirits, nature's spirits. But we say there is an intelligence. In every one there is a force. Now, what follows is kind of strange, and I find it vague and even confusing, as if she doesn't really want to tell them what's really going on. So she says, she refers to someone called Hartmann. Hartmann there writes about undines. Now, these are female water spirits or nymphs, and he believes they are real creatures. It's a little bit too much to believe in sylphs, which are wood nymphs. They are creatures of our imaginations, and they do not exist by themselves. So she doesn't even say, well, should we believe in the undines? Should we believe in the, well, she said not the sylphs, but it's a kind of funny answer, I thought. So one of her students says, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put that up. Okay. Would they not exist to the person who believes in them, in that seriously? And her answer is, every one of us can believe in elementals which they create for themselves. You can create an elemental, but this elemental will have no existence outside your vitiated imagination. Now, vitiated, if you don't know, means impaired or spoiled. So she's being very scathing about this. It will be an intelligence, but the form you will give it and the attributes you will give it will be of your own creation. And then she says, and this is the horrible thing. So here's the message. Don't try to create your own elementals. That's what you can take from that. The elementals are around, but we don't have to try to create some of our own. And her student says, and it weakens you physically. And she says this, it will make a lunatic of you. It evaporizes you. This is why most mediums end in the lunatic asylum or get drunkards, that means become drunkards, for life. So she was very, very against people who try to interfere in this world, even though you'll see later she had the ability to contact it herself and make use of the powers, but she only did that earlier on in life and not later. So now, what follows is another conversation between HPB and a student, still trying to understand the nature of the elementals. The student, if I understand you, an elemental is a center of force without intelligence, without moral character or tendencies, but capable of being directed in its movements by human thoughts, which may, consciously or not, give it any form, and to a certain extent, intelligence. Now, do you notice some key information there? That is that they are without moral character, and they're without intelligence of their own. but can be given intelligence by humans. So they haven't got any sense of right and wrong. There's no morality there. So her answer to that is, the elementals, are centers of force or energy, which are acted on by us while thinking and in other bodily motions. We also act on them and give them form by a species of thought which we have no register of, no record of. Now, if we're not aware of what we're doing, then you can see the potential danger in this. If we're having thoughts and we don't know what effect they're having, if they're detrimental or what, this is dangerous. So it's very important to be aware of this, because it means that we are giving them form by our thoughts. So we must guard our thoughts. So she goes on. As it, the elemental world, is automatic and like a photographic plate, all atoms continually arriving at and departing from the human system are constantly assuming the impression conveyed by the acts and thoughts of that person. And therefore, if he sets up a strong current of thought, he attracts elementals in greater numbers, and they will all take on one prevailing tendency or color, so that all new arrivals find a homogeneous color or image which they instantly assume. So consider the significance of this. We need to ask ourselves, what kinds of thoughts are helpful and what would be unhelpful? Now, also notice where she says about this sets up a strong current of thought, or if we set up a strong current of thought. So we have to be very wary of it, unless that is totally constructive. But otherwise, you just have to be careful if you feel very strongly about something. So then the student says, if they are attracted and repelled by thoughts, do they move with the velocity of thought? And her answer is, they move with the velocity of thought. In their world, there is no space or time as we understand those terms. So something that moves as quickly as your thought means you don't have a lot of space and time. Once you've had the thought, they're there. They're picking up that thought, picking up that energy. And so, once again, it's a warning to just be careful of the thoughts you have. Now, this is a related subject, and it's concerning producing phenomena. So in this next passage, HPB explains why great care needs to be taken when communicating with or coming into contact with the elemental energies. So in the case I'll speak of next, this involves producing phenomena. Adepts have the ability to produce items known as phenomena, and HPB was able to do this herself. Now, there's a very famous story about a teacup she produced. It was actually dug out of the earth and matched the set that they were using for tea at the time. And she couldn't have known in advance that she was going to be at that particular spot. So, and that teacup's on exhibit in Adyar in India, in the World Centre for the Theosophical Society. Now, it's important to note that we are told that the production of phenomena is not possible without either the aid or disturbance of the elementals. So, if we want to produce phenomena, we have to disturb the elementals. Now, her students are interested in this, and her reply, I think, is worrying, because they ask, how then about the doing of phenomena by adepts? And she says, each phenomenon entails the expenditure of great force and also brings on a correspondingly great disturbance in the elemental world, which disturbance is beyond the limit natural to ordinary human life. Note that she uses the word disturbance 3 times there. And the word disturb, the Latin root, is demolish or upset. So there's a lot to avoid when doing anything that can involve a disturbance. And she qualifies the disturbance caused by saying that producing phenomena involves the expenditure of great force beyond the limit natural to ordinary human life, thus emphasizing that it is something to be avoided. So we will see next what ensues from the disturbance caused by producing phenomena. It then follows that as soon as the phenomenon is completed, the disturbance occasioned begins to be compensated for. So it's not just a case of do something, and that's it, it's finished with. It has to be compensated for. The elementals are in greatly excited motion and precipitate themselves in various directions. They are not able to affect those who are protected, but they are able, or rather it is possible for them to enter into the sphere of unprotected persons, and especially those persons who are engaged in the study of occultism. Now, how do we know what is an unprotected person and a protected person? You may think you're protected, but you may not find out until you've done something you wish you hadn't done. So it seems to me it's much safer, as we're not told that here, it's much safer just to say, yeah, well, just leave that alone. Just leave, don't even think about producing these phenomena. Because the reason I'm saying all this is because there are people who want this kind of information, and some who I've met who've come to the Theosophical Society and they say, oh, I want to be able to do black magic. And, you say, well, we're not here. We're not in the business of teaching you how to do black magic. We don't know how to do it ourselves, or I hope we don't. I certainly don't. And I don't want to know. It's much better just to keep away from those things. Those who are able to do it will see there are occasions when there are good reasons for producing the phenomena. But for the rest of us, let's just leave it alone, but know about it because we can use it positively, as you'll see later on. So, what follows next? Well, I find frightening anyway. She says, so remember, the action has to be compensated for. And she says, and then they become agents in concentrating the karma of those persons, producing troubles and disasters often, or other difficulties which might otherwise have been so spread out over a period of time as not to be counted more than the ordinary vicissitudes of life. So in other words, if karmically there were going to be things coming to you, it could be that they're spread out over time and you face them one at a time. But what this is saying is that that spread of time might not be available to you, might come to you all in a rush, and you'll have a lot of things then to deal with, maybe more than you can cope with. So, just to go back over that, they become agents in concentrating the karma of those persons. Now, adepts will nevertheless sometimes produce phenomena in spite of this knowledge. But an adept will not produce a phenomenon unless he sees the desire in the mind of another lower or higher adept or student For then there is a sympathetic relation established, and also a tacit acceptance of the consequences which may ensue. Now, I don't know what reason a person would have for taking this action and not an adept. I don't know, but obviously it does happen. Now, also, just to say, it would be very surprising to hear that an adept produced a phenomenon for some whimsical reason. There must be a very good reason for it. But a reason such as getting someone in advance the result of a horse race so they can make a lot of money, that's not a good reason. But that's what certainly those of you who are familiar with Edgar Cayce know, that this happened to him, that it was an abuse of the abilities that he had, and it made him feel very ill as well. So, and she goes on, it will also help to understand the peculiar reluctance often of some persons who can perform phenomena to produce them in cases where they think their production would be beneficial, and also why they are never done in order to compass worldly ends, as is natural for worldly people to suppose might be done, such as procuring money, transferring objects, influencing minds, and so on. Now, influencing minds, it's on dangerous ground, isn't it? I mean, obviously, we would hope that any good we do will influence people, but in a gentle way, and not in any kind of a forceful way, not by calling upon the energies of the elementals. So it's clear from all this that HPB is warning against using a power such as the ability to produce phenomena without extremely good reason. Now, she was clearly reluctant to give out too much information on the subject of the elementals, as is stated plainly in response to a question by a student on why she didn't give more information out about the elementals. Now, bear in mind that these following words are being spoken to the same highly intelligent, educated students I was referring to earlier. So the student asks, is there any reason why you do not give a more detailed explanation of the constitution of elementals and the modes by which they work? Answer, yes, there are many reasons. Among others is your inability, shared by most people of the present day, to comprehend a description of things that pertain to a world with which you are not familiar and for which you do not yet possess terms of expression. Were I to put forth these descriptions, the greater part would seem vague and incomprehensible on one hand, while on the other, many of them would mislead you because of the interpretation put on them by yourself. Another reason is that if the constitution, field of action, and method of action of elementals were given out, there are some minds of a very inquiring and peculiar bent who soon could find out how to come into communication with these extraordinary beings, with results disadvantageous to the community as well as the individuals. So remember, I mentioned that earlier, that it's bad enough if you cause karmic consequences to yourself, but if you cause harm to others, then that is far worse. And this point is emphasizing the disadvantage not only to the practitioner, but much more seriously to the community, which invokes even greater karma, as HPB states elsewhere in her writings. And if you see the book, The Key to Theosophy, she does go into that. She's really very hard on anyone who causes any harm to others and the community in general. So the student comes forth with an answer. Why so? Is it not well to increase the sum of human knowledge, even respecting the most recondite matters, parts of nature? Now, recondite means dealing with very profound, difficult, or abstruse subject matter beyond ordinary understanding, what we would call esoteric. So he's saying, is it not well to increase the sum of human knowledge? Or can it be that the elementals are bad? And she replies, it is wise to increase the knowledge of nature's laws, but always with proper limitations. All things will become known someday. Nothing can be kept back when men have reached the point where they can understand. But at this time, it would not be wise to give them for the asking certain knowledge that would not be good for them. That knowledge relates to elementals, and it can for the present be kept back from the scientists of today. So long as it can be retained from them, it will be, until they and their followers are of a different stamp. So now the next part deals with whether there is a moral character to the elementals, which was referred to earlier. Now, what HPB says is unequivocal, so please note it well. As to the moral character of the elementals, they have none. They are colorless in themselves, except some classes, and merely assume the tint, so to speak, of the person using them. The student asks, will our scientific men one day, then, be able to use these beings? And if so, what will be the manner of it? Will their use be confined to only the good men of the earth? And she says, the hour is approaching when all this will be done. But the scientists of today are not the men to get this knowledge. They are only pygmy forerunners who sow seeds and delve blindly in no thoroughfares. They are too small to be able to grasp these mighty powers, but they are not wise enough to see that their methods will eventually lead to black magic in centuries to come, when they shall be forgotten. And she goes on to say the following frightening words. When elemental forces are used similarly as we now see electricity and other natural energies adapted to various purposes, there will be war in heaven. Good men will not alone possess the ability to use them. Indeed, the sort of man you now call good will not be the most able. The wicked will, however, pay liberally for the power of those who can wield such forces. And at last, the supreme masters, who now guard this knowledge from children, well, she means us, will have to come forth. Then will ensue a dreadful war, in which, as has ever happened, the masters will succeed, and the evildoers be destroyed by the very engines, principalities, and powers prostituted to their own purposes during years of intense, selfish living. But why dilate on these? In these days, it's only a prophecy. So she throws away, at the end, she just throws it all away. But now, notice the strength and intensity of these words. She's using the word prostituted, the powers prostituted to their own purposes. And then she goes on to refer to during years of intense, selfish living. Now, she'd only be using these to issue the greatest warning against using powers in relation to the elementals for any selfish and negative purposes. But, once again, she puts them off by saying, well, it's only a prophecy. Now, the whole section that follows is hugely important because it relates to the karma aspect of it, particularly. So the student asks the question, permit me to ask you again, are elementals beings? And she says, it is not easy to convey to you an idea of the constitution of the elementals. Strictly speaking, they are not, that is, beings, because the word elementals have been used in reference to a class of them that have no being such as mortals have. Many things well known about them cannot be put into ordinary language. So we don't know what she means by this. The student then asks, is there not some connection between the karma of man and the elementals? And her answer is this, a very important one. The elemental world has become a strong factor in the karma of the human race. Being unconscious, automatic, and photographic, it assumes the complexion of the human family itself. Now this is really important what follows. In the earlier ages, when we may postulate that men had not yet begun to make bad karma, the elemental world was more friendly to man because it had not received unfriendly impressions. So the elementals would have been helpful to mankind in that condition, but it hadn't yet, the elemental kingdoms hadn't yet received unfriendly impressions from humans. So she goes on, but so soon as man began to become ignorant, unfriendly to himself and the rest of creation, the elemental world began to take on exactly the same complexion and return to humanity the exact pay, so to speak, due for the actions of humanity. So it's our actions that caused the problem. We became ignorant, unfriendly, even to ourselves, she says, and the rest of creation. So the elemental world assumes, because it's not saying, oh no, I don't want to do that, that's not good. No, it just gives back what it receives. So it gives back the exact pay, as she says, due for the actions of humanity. So the elemental world, being unconscious force, returns or reacts upon humanity exactly as humanity acted towards it, whether the actions of men were done with the knowledge of these laws or not. So in these times it has come to be that the elemental world has the complexion and action which is the exact result of all the actions and thoughts and desires of men from the earliest times. And being unconscious and only acting according to the natural laws of its being, the elemental world is a powerful factor in the workings of karma. And so long as mankind, this is really crucial because this shows how we can play a part in it according to our choices. So long as mankind does not cultivate brotherly feeling and charity towards the whole of creation, just so long will the elementals be without the impulse to act for our benefit. But so soon and wherever man or men begin to cultivate brotherly feeling and love for the whole of creation, there and then the elementals begin to take on the new condition. And this statement is of monumental importance because it indicates the power we have to benefit the creation, which, as HPB says, is by cultivating brotherly feeling and love for the whole of creation. So, I'm going to repeat a little of what I've told you because I don't know if you're like me. I can't just hear something once and get it. But I do want to say first that it's of the greatest importance to reflect on what's being said and to try to incorporate it whenever we can into our everyday lives. Now, this is no easy task, and it's not going to happen overnight. But by cultivating brotherly feeling in whatever way we can when we're able, it will add strength to all others who are also making the same effort. Without this work being done, we are being told that the elemental energies will work against humanity. So these now are just some reminder quotations from earlier. The elemental world has become a strong factor in the karma of the human race. Being unconscious, automatic, and photographic, it assumes the complexion of the human family itself. In the earlier ages, when we may postulate that man had not yet begun to make bad karma, the elemental world was more friendly to man because it had not received unfriendly impressions. But so soon as man began to become ignorant, unfriendly to himself and the rest of creation, the elemental world began to take on exactly the same complexion and return to humanity the exact pay, so to speak, due for the actions of humanity. When elemental forces are used similarly as we now see electricity and other natural energies adapted to various purposes, there will be war in heaven. Good men will not alone possess the ability to use them. Indeed, the sort of man you now call good will not be the most able. The wicked will, however, pay liberally for the power of those who can wield such forces. And here, at least, there's one hopeful thought that she gives us. And at last, the supreme masters who now guard this knowledge from children will have to come forth. So I think I'd like to just go back to the positive side, which is this. She says, so long as mankind does not cultivate brotherly feeling and charity towards the whole of creation, just so long will the elementals be without the impulse to act for our benefit. But, and here's the good part, so soon and wherever man or men begin to cultivate brotherly feelings and love for the whole of creation, there and then the elementals begin to take on the new condition. Now, some of you will know that the first object of the Theosophical Society, dating back to its founding in 1885, was and remains to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. Now, this isn't asking us to try to change the whole of humanity, but within the organization and within ourselves, to strive to work towards the goal of promoting greater brotherhood in our own thinking and actions. Until this happens, we're at the mercy of the elementals and of those who at best behave selfishly in some degree, or at worst wish to bring evil to humanity. Sometimes we in the TS and other societies like ours are accused of being only theoretical and study purely for the sake of intellectual satisfaction. I would suggest that to go away from this lecture thinking that it was interesting, but forgetting about it by tomorrow, is to prove such critics correct in what they say. It's up to us to make it practical in everyday living. So please take this message seriously and put it into practice wherever possible. Please remember, of course, though, there's no point in expecting instant results. Nevertheless, it's important to remember that any effort in this direction can never be wasted. So, as I said at the beginning of this talk, I sometimes do wonder if I should speak publicly about these powerful energies, because I know there are those who would like to have power and to use it to their own selfish advantage. For this reason, it's even more incumbent on those hearing about it here to have goodness and unselfishness as our aim, in order to ensure that the elemental energies work to the advantage of humanity and not against it. Thank you.